2, 3, check. 1, 2, 3. Check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. My oxes are at 0. Sure. Yeah. Check. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Good signal? Okay. Check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, this is Jared checking the podium microphone right now. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm actually projecting at the microphone here. I'm not just talking really quietly. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Once again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're good with that, Ash? Or you want me to keep going? Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Checking the microphone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're done with the microphone.
Okay.
I had to laugh. 2 seconds, like a little while ago. We were getting set up for a different sort of setup. I was like, okay, do you have any adapters on you? And like they all the adapters. And I'm like, I can tell you're both Mac users. And they're like, oh, that's a bit of a read. I'm like, nobody else carries adapters like that. As an audiovisual technician, as soon as we see a Mac, we go, no.
Proprietary cables.
Why? Yeah, but that's the problem. The rest of the world isn't in your bubble.
It's nice in the bubble. Okay, so I have a mechanical question because I have to sort of do the housekeeping.
Okay.
The 2 microphones that I see up there, that's for audience questions.
Yes, that's Q&A microphones.
Terrific. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, do you have a pair of handhelds set up for the tables or labs? Handhelds.
Okay. Yeah, might be a good idea to have those
Yeah.
up just so we don't have to. Terrific. Okay. So I know doors are opening shortly. Yeah, I'm hearing feedback.
It's like up for on, down for off. Yeah, he's going to take care of it.
Okay. All right.
Check 1, 2. All right. You might want to mute them as well.
I am so happy to see you. How you doing?
All right. This, we've got literally like,
Yeah, exactly.
So, I can just
Sorry,
turn on
you have to find Sarah.
I can see the login screen on the two projector screens down here, and you can't see it upstairs at all. I just wanted to double check that's what's going on. Yeah, no problem. Except, and well, that's what I was just asking. I just hit it, and I was just asking.
Okay.
So, Pat, if you're looking at the monitor right now, the one that's supposed to have the PowerPoint on it, do you see a black screen, or do you still see a black screen? Okay, so it's black even though we're seeing it on the projectors. I did swap it there.
That could be your workaround.
All right, well, we're going to get rid of it together. We'll just use okay, so I want output there. And I want input there. We'll go with input 3 because why not? I'll do the number 3 in this case. It's better than 4 and 5. Oh, I don't like 5. And 4 is supposed to be bad functions, right? So why not? 44th floor is supposed to be like double death or something like that. Hopefully that'll start doing its thing.
Check. Check, check.
All net. All net.
Welcome to this event that is hosted by the Riddell Graduate Program in Political Management and in partnership with YouTube Canada. I'm Jennifer Robson. I am an associate professor and the director of the program, and I am so delighted to welcome you here to our first in-person event in public in a little while. And we are here in this lovely venue at Dominion Chalmers Centre, which we at Carleton acknowledge is on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin. And we honor the people, the treaty agreements, and all the unceded lands of Turtle Island. So as I said, this is our first event with YouTube Canada, and it marks the launch of, as well, our MPM YouTube channel, where, if I understand correctly, we have over 100 viewers who are watching online today, so welcome to you. Thank you all very much for being here, both online and in person. We are so excited to have with us tonight Sarah Galvez from Google's Social Lab. Sarah worked as Director of Social Media and Audience Development for the successful campaign of now President Joe Biden. She's worked on more political and issue campaigns, I think, than many of us could even list if we tried. Hillary Clinton's campaign from 2015-16, the 2018 midterms, just to name a few. She's advised clients from Planned Parenthood to Bloomberg Philanthropies and many more. So we are so fortunate to have her here with us today to give a talk about her experiences and observations on what works when it comes to digital campaigns. After her talk, Sarah will be sitting down with my fantastic colleague, Dan Arnold. Dan is an instructor in the political management program. And when he's not helping to train the next generation of campaign leaders here in Canada, he's very busy as Chief Strategy Officer at Polera. But he's also worked in the belly of the beast, so to speak. He's worked with the Trudeau team, joined them in 2014 in opposition, and then served as Director of Research and Advertising in the Prime Minister's office. So Dan will be opening the conversation with Sarah, and those of you who are here in person with us will have a chance to ask questions as well. So when Dan gives you the signal, I'll just ask you to move to one of the microphones in the aisles. But first, I am delighted to welcome to the stage our program's key partner in tonight's event and the head of civics in Canada for YouTube, Alex Peterson. Thank you very much.
Okay, you all came to sit on church pews on a Monday night in December to talk about civics. So you are my favorite people here. And for the people watching online, you're also on YouTube. So you're also my favorite people. So thank you very much. My name is Alex Patterson. I am the civics lead for YouTube in Canada. We're thrilled about this partnership. When I presented the opportunity to potentially do something with the school, it was one of those sort of ideating sessions where it goes further, faster, and we came to a really cool idea to put something together for practitioners, people who either are working on a campaign, going to be working on a campaign, work in advocacy either for a client or for a principal on the Hill. So hopefully you leave tonight with some stuff to work into what you do. What I do is I help people that work in government, politics, civil society grow on the platform. We want to make sure that authoritative voices are communicating clearly and with Canadians, and so we want to make sure that they've got the best tools to do that. So that's what I do. So I work a lot with departments, political parties, members of parliament, but I also get to, not that that stuff isn't fun, but I also get to do fun stuff like this. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. I'm going to give you a sense of YouTube by the numbers. We're going to talk a little bit about civics and responsibility. I'm going to give you just a real rip through best practices, and then a pitch for how we can help. I'm going to do this in 6 minutes. So cheer me on. Let's talk about numbers first. It's not YouTube unique, but digital video is and should be an essential part of your content strategy. In 2021, 82% of the world's internet traffic was video, which is mind-blowing. And YouTube, I think, is a really powerful gateway for that traffic. Globally, we've got 2 billion monthly logged in users. That's 63% of internet users. We've got 1 billion hours watched every day. We're in 100 countries across 80 languages, and we have 250 million hours per day is watched in the living room, not just on your phone. And in Canada, I mean, YouTube is massive in Canada across all devices and demographics. We are the #1 destination to watch video in Canada. 18 to 34-year-olds watch over 50 minutes of YouTube today. You probably know someone whose numbers are higher. And 96% of the Canadian digital population is on YouTube. And again, 16 million people watch YouTube on their TV screens in Canada. So a really powerful gateway. And Gen Z, YouTube is the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to video content. 78% agree. And speaking of Gen Z, Shorts is also a major growth area for us. So if you've seen on your YouTube app, Shorts is a real big growth area for us. We've got 1.5 billion monthly logged in users, and we surpassed 30 billion daily views globally, which is over 4 times in 2021. So you're going to hear Sarah say 9:16 a lot, like vertical, vertical, vertical. YouTube is becoming a place for multi-format content. I'll hold on this here. We're going to use some of my precious 6 minutes to talk about this slide. I think one of the things that we differentiate ourselves is that YouTube is first and foremost a video and a search platform. And it has some common metrics with other social platforms, so like reach and followers. But there's also specific stuff as well, so views, watch time, impressions, and share. And I think that's informative and does inform the way in which, if you've got a social strategy, that's awesome. That's great. You should also have a video strategy layered on top of that. And those things talk to one another, but they are distinct in many cases. And YouTube is where people come to watch videos completely. They listen with the sound on. 95% of watch time comes with videos in full screen and with the sound on. And that's different from other platforms. You've got a more leaned in and a more immersed audience when you're speaking to an audience on YouTube. And people come to YouTube for a bunch of different things. If you think about your own, you come to be inspired, you come to have access, you come to learn, you come to be entertained. And when I take a look at that, I see that as, this is our mission. YouTube's mission is to give everyone a voice and show them the world. And we do this by educating, inspiring, entertaining, and providing equitable access to billions of people every day. I read that and I see that's a civic mission. And I think it means that we are uniquely placed to actually help civic creators succeed and grow on the platform. So if you work in politics, if you work in government, if you work in an aspect of public life, I think you can use our platform and you can use YouTube to build brand and reach new audiences. You can own your own moments and break through with your own messaging. You can really deepen your relationship with constituents. And you can drive and inspire offline action, which is something that if you work in politics, if you work in campaigns, you want to move online to offline. So for my money, YouTube is one of the civic education and action platforms in Canada. But we do that with a tremendous amount of responsibility. We have a 4 R's responsibility framework, not just because we like alliteration, but because it's incredibly important to us. So we remove content that violates our policies. We reduce the spread of information. We raise authoritative voices on our platform, including elections information, and we reward. So we recognize and reward news and political creators. And I'd be happy to talk more about this. I've got like 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to rip through this stuff here. I've got 4 tips that I would love you to think about if you are either getting started, advising someone to get started, or in some cases getting restarted. Because I can't tell you how many people that I talk to who the intern set up the YouTube channel in a campaign in 2014 and we don't have access to it anymore, and boy, oh boy, we really would. So in some cases it means getting restarted. The first thing you need to do is you need to find your why. When you program a channel, when you have real estate on the internet, You need to have a why behind it. You're making a promise to your audience. Here's the kind of stuff that you're going to see when you come here. So that comes down to promising, all right, here's the kind of formats you're going to see. Here is the length. Here's the cadence with which we post. What do you, whether it's a campaign, whether it's an office, whether it's a client, what do you have that's unique that no one else has? That's the promise and your why that you're creating by having a channel. The second thing is to, this slide said be consistent. I inserted your kind of, right? Because I think one of the things that, and Sarah and I have been talking about this a lot during this trip and tour, is it's really great to come in and say, like, here is all the best practices. Here is all the flashy stuff that you can do. But if you work in a really resource-constrained environment, it's hard. It's hard to implement a multi-million-dollar campaign when you've got one person in an office whose job it is to be an expert across all platforms. And that has an impact on consistency. One of the things that we see best on YouTube is that if you're consistent, you grow. And so I would encourage you to be your kind of consistent. Be doably consistent. If it means that you're posting one thing heroic every month, great. That's your thing. If it's like twice a month, that's great. You have to match it to the resources, and that's your kind of consistency. Next, this may sound weird, but like treat your audience like they exist, like they are there. Your channel, whether you've got 30 subscribers or 300,000 subscribers, that's an audience, and you should treat them like they exist. It's very tempting to, and we love YouTube for this, we can upload videos and we can get a great library and an archive, and you can create an information hub and a really great educational resource hub. But the channels that we see with tremendous growth, particularly in the civic space, actually acknowledge that the audience is there, right? So a lot of direct-to-camera, a lot of community management. If you're going to take a break, if you're going to be off for a week, even if you feel like you're only talking to 30 people, treat those 30 people with respect. Tell them you're going to take a break. Like, treat your audience like they actually exist and they're actually tuning in. Because if you think about your own subscriptions, you're probably already very, this is my pet thought here, is that everyone is very protective of what they subscribe to. If you think your podcast feed or your video feed, you're very protective of what you click subscribe. So if you've got someone who is subscribed, they have bought in and they said, I would like to hear from you, which means that you owe them the respect of communicating them and treating them like they actually exist. And that ladders down to the kind of content you do and how often you do it. And the last thing I'll say is test, learn, repeat. And we've got an amazing analytics engine. Other platforms have wonderful analytics engines. I encourage you to go towards what's working, try something new. It can be a little scary because you're giving up a bit of control, but you find wonderful things when you test and you iterate and you learn from that. I'm going to move past this really quickly because I've already overextended my time. I'll just simply say, hi, I'm here to help. If you want to talk afterwards, if you want to talk about stuff that you're working on, or stuff that you're curious about, or if you're interested in how either a client or a department or a campaign can grow using YouTube, I'm your guy to talk to, and I'd be happy to do so. So that's me. And now we're going to hear from Sarah. And Jen has already done a wonderful introduction of Sarah. I will just simply say that it's very rare, I think, to find someone who has done so much, so young, and is so willing to share and learn and scale that for an audience. So I'm very happy that Sarah's here, and please, if you do me the honor of welcoming her to the stage with a round of applause.
Thank you. I'm not 6 feet tall like Alex, so I need an apple box.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see you, both in person and online. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about best practices for creative as it relates to civic engagement and some of the work that I've done in particular with teams across, as Jen said, thinking about the 2016 presidential election, the 2020 presidential election, and a little bit of some stuff in between. So first of all, let me level set with you. In 2020, I was the director of social media and audience development for the Biden for America campaign during the general election season. That means it's a large 6-month sprint to the finish. I think that's a little bit longer than the Canadian election cycle, but just as tiring, I assume. And so I had the distinct opportunity to build a team of social strategists who really thought very critically about the work that they were doing and intentionally about the audiences that they were building. Because we were fortunate enough to have very good resources and dedicated funds toward digital, we're able to hire a number of different strategists that could really be thought leaders specifically on those platforms. So a strategist primarily for Facebook, for Instagram, for YouTube and live streaming, Twitter, for Spanish language content, and specifically for vertical content 9x16. You'll hear me talk a lot about 9x16 and how incredibly powerful that format is and how I think it's just like totally trend-setting at the moment. But we knew that in the last cycle that we wanted to make sure that we had someone who was just thinking about the world in that aspect ratio. Additionally, the team that I brought with me to the campaign not only came from the political landscape. You can take your more traditional folks from like campaigns that maybe had lost in the primary, but I also had the opportunity to bring people in from spaces in the private sector that really made sense for that audience and for that platform. So say, for instance, I brought in my vertical stories strategist from Elite Models. And this was very specific because he had a great eye and a vision for how to make stories content for some of the world's best models. And so taking that, what is the learning, what is the opportunity there, and bring it into the Biden campaign. Additionally, I hired from BuzzFeed, I hired from Paramount Pictures. I myself started at a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company doing influencer and creator strategies. So I made that transition from private sector to public sector and really have found that some of the best teams that I've had are when you bring folks in from all over. And so it's something that I really encourage folks to think about as they're building teams and thinking about the right kinds of people to bring into the fold. Oh, part of the slide did not load right. Okay, there we go. We might have a couple of those. These are fairly GIF and video heavy. So what I'll do is immediately go into some of thoughts around best practices, and I'm really gonna split it into two different ideas. The idea of proactive content and then reactive content. As we all know, campaigns, working in government, you have a lot of things that you can plan for, and then you have the news cycle that just happens, and you're riding the wave. So in this case, one of the first things that we did when we started this revamped social team within the Biden campaign for the general election was think about what content was already doing very well on the platform. And in that moment, platforms are really emphasizing data visualization, the idea of how can you explain a piece of content, right, a piece of policy, without you having to actually really say much at all and visually cue the audience members into it. This was one of the first pieces of data visualization that we ended up doing. At this time, we were running against an opponent who really was kind of fumbling the COVID situation in the United States. And we wanted to really dynamically show how much we were falling behind other countries that we admired, that we think about ourselves in the same league of, and show just like how poorly we were doing, and how our leadership was needed to come in and take the reins and really turn this around. And so this ended up doing particularly well, and as a result, we started moving into different types and testing different types of data visualization, not only around persuasion content, but also around, say, mobilization content. This was one piece of content that was really quite interesting because in the US, we have a system where you opt in to vote. It's not a required voting system. And people always thought the race between Hillary Clinton and the race between Donald Trump in 2016 was like super close, right? Like 80,000 votes in a couple of states determined that. But if you actually then look at the larger scale and picture and then the amount of people who were registered to vote and just did not vote in the United States, you see this like very different idea of what that election could have been like for Democrats who wanted Hillary Clinton as the president of the United States in 2016. And so this particular piece of content did very well with Gen Z and trying to get them to mobilize to register to vote, which is fantastic. And then we were able to localize using that same principle because we knew it did well on our larger channel, and then how do we build that content for some of our more regional or smaller channels. The other thing that we did was work a lot with new formats, really trying to proactively understand what content was doing well on the platforms and dynamically build that. And while we basically had the same 5 topics that we were talking about, the tenets of the Build Back Better plan, if you've ever heard of it, we like alliteration, just like YouTube apparently. We had to find ways to talk about these pieces of legislation and policy, but then also mix in new formats, how are you mixing in fun content, that sort of thing. And so these were some of the pieces that we just sort of started to build on Reels specifically, and then move into formats like YouTube Shorts as well. And so it can be as simple as asking for time with your principal to say, hey, do you mind hanging out with your dog so we can film some of that content? Because the internet loves dog content and we know it's gonna do well on the platform. And it may bring in a subsect of audience members who are not as attuned to looking at more heavy-duty policy content, but are there for cat and dog videos, right? You have to give people what they want, and so we did a lot of experimentation in this format, this 9:16 format that has really done well and is going to continue, I think, to be a big part of strategies moving forward. The other thing that we did is, again, looking to the pieces of content that are already doing well on the internet and trying to emulate them as much as possible. Say, for instance, on YouTube, we specifically created content that mimicked formats like reaction videos, which did so well on the platform already, and it is a sort of piece of content that people are attuned to like seeing and understanding what it is without having to explain it in too much depth. But it also allowed us to bring in members of our coalitions, right? How do we talk about veterans react to Donald Trump saying things about our armed forces members, or students reacting to education plans, right? Sort of bringing in to the fold those communities in a format that we know already is dynamic, and then going from there to programmatically build those, a cadence of many of them that continue to go on the platform week after week. And many of those don't require the time of your principal, and as a result are a little bit easier to make because you're not trying to ask, can we have 30 minutes with President Biden to do this thing when he's probably, thinking about the G20 summit or something like that. The other work that we did was primarily work with influencers in a much larger scale way than previously before. So not only trying to find influencers that make sense for their policy position, but thread the needle between the things that make sense for them. So say, for instance, Cardi B really cares about healthcare systems. And so how do we then pair her up to talk to our principal about healthcare systems? And finding the ways to not alienate their audience with something that is just like totally out of left field when they're coming to the channel. Things that they may have already shown an affinity for, that their audience already knows, hey, this is something that they've talked about, so it doesn't feel very chaotic. Same thing with, like, you see this piece with Hailey Bieber. Hailey Bieber, obviously, like a major fashion influencer. Instead of having her do a piece that was specifically on a large piece of policy, we had her model a piece of custom merchandise that we were putting in our store to help us gather donations and fundraise. So how do you make those influencer pieces work for you and for your candidate and for those issues specifically? Proactive approach also meant that we knew that we had an audience that we needed to reach, Gen Z. We knew that they like to be talked to in a different way than previously before. And so we had a lot of fun with the idea of Gen Z and supporter-oriented hub for content, which we called Team Joe. We had 2 channels on both Twitter and on Instagram, one that was oriented towards a more level-set, minded policy orientation at Joe Biden. You want to make that presidential, right? Team Joe was chaotic in a professional way and really capitalized on things like meme formats, on the sort of psychedelic ingredient elements that you would find just if you were perusing your own Instagram feed. We even implemented things like using a Joe Biden young thirst trap, right? Like in a way that like made sense, and it's not the kind of content you would expect to see from a presidential account, but it still had an orientation to our campaign. And so this was one of the most fun things we did in this campaign. And because we showed essentially return on investment by doing this, by asking our leadership to let us experiment a little and try this, we were able to also do additional sort of pieces that had never really been done before in an election cycle, in a presidential election cycle. So we launched a Twitch account, and we made sure to have the content be really oriented towards what a person on Twitch would see, gaming content, 8-bit, sort of that nostalgia focus, but make it right for Joe Biden. We're not trying to force him to go on Twitch with a streamer and say, like, you know, play video games. That's not him. And so, like, how do we make it him? So we started with a train stream set to lo-fi hip-hop music because Joe Biden loves trains. He was an avid Amtrak user for many years. And so his brand is synonymous with our public transportation, our rail system there. And so train streams, apparently a thing that do very well in the ASMR space on Twitch. And so we found that connection piece and were able to do things like the train stream and cut every time he was on his train tour to his speaking engagements. How do you sprinkle in that element of fun and character, but into the larger scheme of your messaging? Another one of these that we were able to really go all out with in this election was partnerships with places like Animal Crossing and Fortnite. Again, meeting the audience where they are and proactively trying to reach out to them in spaces where you know that they're spending a lot of time on. So Animal Crossing during this period, it had just like released, it was like massive, major. And I think they have, since Nintendo does not allow people to do this, I'm very sorry to that, but it was also one thing that we thought was really cool. We worked on it with some community members, and also I think it was like an organization that helped us build this because they thought like, hey, we want to pitch you this idea. Good ideas can come from anywhere, right? And if people are willing to help, take the help, because it really allowed us to make a big splash in terms of earned media, but also show Gen Z that we were trying to reach out to them in this way and not trying to force our brand down to them. And then in terms of approach here too, I think one thing I want to really hone in on is the idea of social as a two-way street. Alex talked a bit about community management and that aspect of it, but also the fact that there's so much great content out there on the internet that like you might not expect. So my Instagram strategist, as part of her daily sort of tasks, she had the distinct pleasure of going through our tagged photos on Instagram, which can be not a great place sometimes, but occasionally you get these gems. And in this case, it was an artist had teamed up with a farmer in Iowa to build these crop circles out of corn of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We would have never seen these if they didn't just tag us on Instagram and our strategists had been going through and trying to manage the community and find these. We ended up reaching out to the artist and to the Instagram page, asking if we could repost it, put it on our own platforms that obviously had much larger reach, and it ended up being one of our best performing pieces of content. And that just came from, you know, someone random in Iowa, and it was great for us because it was very little work that we had to do, but showing people that there is supporters out there, there are other folks out there, and if you show this enthusiasm, you might also get posted on our channels. And now we kind of move on to like reactive mode. So there's a lot that you can do in the pre-sense, but now it's like, what do you do when you have a moment that is just like, okay, I have to capitalize on this. And they can be both very quick and short and or it can be like long form and poignant. And I'm gonna show you a couple of examples of that. So one thing I like to tell people is like always be on your toes when it comes to social, especially on the campaign trail. One brilliant thing that the Biden campaign had was a traveling digital director who was constantly with the vice president at the time. And so whether it was at events or this or that, they just knew to always be able to whip out their phone and to create content. This was a moment backstage at an event where we happened to get this. Someone sent it to us in like a Slack message and was like, you have to see this, we have to put it out in some fashion or format, so hold on.
That's what I do. That's what I do. Whoa. All net. All net.
So if someone hadn't been there with their phone out, just being like, I'm gonna take a video of this, would never have been captured. We put it on the internet. It goes crazy viral, right? And it's this moment that shows like the togetherness of Joe Biden and Barack Obama in that moment. But also it's just like a fun, lighthearted moment on the trail. I think people have this perception of our politicians as like very stately, but some of the best content is that behind the scenes content, is that like, it's not necessarily them sitting at a desk, it's maybe them walking through the hallways, being in the places that, you know, you might never get to see, but they have the opportunity to show you. And that behind the scenes content and these behind the scenes moments go really viral, in my opinion, for that reason. For the moments that you don't see, but what is it, the Hamilton lyric, like the room where it happens, right? Like, and you wanna be a part of it, we're gonna be the conduit to do that. Again, reactivity. I mentioned this one, I know I always have to caveat it with, I hope you guys saw it, because if not, this is gonna sound very random. But during the vice presidential debate in 2020, and by the way, vice presidential debates are typically like not as high bar, you know, we're kind of like, okay, it should be chill. Senator Harris at the time and Vice President Pence just having a conversation and a debate at a seated table, until a fly lands on Vice President Pence's head and proceeds to not move for about 2 minutes. And everyone on the internet collectively loses their mind because they're like, are you seeing this or am I seeing this? What is happening here? And so we had to have a conversation about how do you react to a moment like that, where it's not necessarily related to your policy, but it's a moment that everyone is collectively having, and how do you go towards that? 2 things. One, Joe Biden is not a mean person. He was very specific with all of his staffers about the fact that he did not want our campaign to be a mean-spirited campaign. Unfortunately, our opponent did not have that same sort of viewpoint in that, and so oftentimes we would shy away from moments like this, whereas our opponents would really like hunker down on us. But in this case, we decided, how are we going to handle this? And it happened in a chat very quickly. How do we handle this? And someone said, well, what if we just put a fly swatter on our merch store? And we said, can you get a fly swatter and put it, like, is that part of the inventory? Like, it's usually like shirts and coffee mugs and that sort of thing. Fly swatter, I had never thought about it. In like 30 seconds, our design director had called her merch guy and was like, hey, do you have a fly swatter for sale that we could do wholesale and make it custom? Yes, okay, what do we put on the fly swatter? And so one of our main things was we had this orientation for some of our content, unity versus division, truth over lies. So we were like, truth over flies. It works. So put truth over flies on it. And then also went to this chat room and said, hey, everyone on the digital team, not even the social team, everyone on the digital team, give me your best fly puns, because good content can come from anywhere, and I do not consider myself a comedian. So we ended up getting this line, don't let this debate buzz off, from, I think it was like a video producer on the team who just like put it out there, and I was like, yes, that. So we go into a chat room for approvals, and we say, hey, we'd like to put this up, here's a graphic that's been mocked up. And we did this all in about 5 minutes, from the time that the fly landed on Vice President Pence's head to the moment that we got this infographic out. And it went mega viral. Additionally, double down. It's already going mega viral. You're seeing it happening in real time. And someone on our team who had been there since the primary said, hey, I think there's a picture of the Vice President holding a fly swatter, but we were told we were not allowed to use it. But it's been many months. So we had to literally text our campaign manager and be like, hey, any chance that we could use this photo in the context of this moment? If it's not in the context of this moment, I totally understand why you do not put this on the internet. It's quite memeable, you know what I mean? And I personally don't want to deal with that. But in this case, it totally makes sense. Pitch in $5 to help this campaign fly with the fly swatter. And it brought in so many donations, but it was a moment that transferred from reactive to social to fundraising very quickly in succession. And we had this out by the end of the debate, and I'm almost positive, don't quote me on this, but I think this was the top fundraising tweet of this debate, even though it didn't include Kamala Harris or Vice President Pence at all in it. So again, rapid response, social is made for it. So you have to have the right systems in place to get it done, but you also have to have the right team, people who can jump on this really quickly and say, all hands on deck, what are we doing right now? And that's how you get one of these extraordinary moments. I'm going to zoom through 2 last things. One additional moment that feels a little bit bigger in this sense was in the 2016 election. So 2016, Democratic National Convention, you have these folks who come in and give speeches on the floor. And you have an idea of what they're going to say. Obviously, it's written remarks. But you don't always know how it's going to affect people in the moment. So this was a Gold Star family. A Gold Star family is a family who's lost a loved one. I think this was their son in combat. I think it was in Afghanistan. And so they came and gave a speech about Islamophobia because their son was Muslim American. And so they had this, very powerful moment where they spoke directly to camera and asked, Mr. Trump, would my son have a place in your America? Have you read the Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy, and literally pulled out a copy of the Constitution and held it up. And the place went, crazy. The internet ended up becoming, this became one of the most poignant moments, like I mentioned, of the Democratic National Convention. And then what we did was we, on the paid media side, asked his family if they would be willing to tell their story. And it became one of our best performing paid media ads of the entire campaign, and it's only a few seconds.
In 2004, my son was stationed in Iraq. He saw a suicide bomber approaching his camp. My son moved forward to stop the bomber when the bomb exploded. He saved everyone in his unit. Only one American soldier died. My son was Captain Humayun Khan. He was 27 years old, and he was a Muslim American. I want to ask Mr. Trump, would my son have a place in your America?
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
And so good moments can come anywhere, and you just have to figure out the appropriate place for that content. And for us, we knew that this was such a powerful message that we wanted to make sure that it was disseminated further than just the people who would see it at the Democratic National Convention, a very wonky place, but also we knew that this made sense. Okay, cool. This is like the last thing I'm going to show you. This is the last thing that we did on the Biden campaign. It took a lot of preparation. It's one of those things where if we had lost, you would have never seen it because it was our finale video. Essentially, what is the first message that you want to put out to the country if you win this election? The preparation that went into that was immense. It included 50 filmmakers from all of the states, and then actually, and including territories too, I believe, and then really honing in on what is the core message that takes us from the start of this campaign and what we've been saying all these months to the start of the transition period and the eventual White House term of President Biden. And so I'll show you this, but I love it. It's great video content, and it primarily did incredibly well on YouTube.
Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties. Now wait a minute. I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed His grace on thee. He crowned my good. Yes, He did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this. America, I love you, America. You see, my God, He done shed His grace on thee. Oh, Lord, I thank you, Lord.
And with that, the dawn of a new age in the US with the Biden presidency. So, we've talked a little bit about proactive approach, who you hire, where you hire them from, thinking about the types of content that you're doing, test and learn, the formats that are new and emerging and getting out there and getting in front of them, and then also how you set yourself up and your teams up to really do well in those reactive moments and take people through the funnel of engagement, whether that's from big moments in the news to social to fundraising. And then eventually how you wrap the whole thing up, whether you lose or you win. I have seen the Hillary Clinton Would Have Won video. I'm sad it never went out into the world, but at the same time, I'm really proud of the one that we did here at the Biden for America camp. And I really hope that this was helpful. And I'm really excited to answer questions and get into the weeds of this with y'all. Thanks. Are we? Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, we got some mics here. Let's put them on. Can people hear? All right. You can get the stylish word cup. I'll get the polka dot one here.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you. That was great. Thank you for braving Ottawa in December. It is not usually what's on our travel brochures, but you still took the time to come up here, and I think we all learned a lot. You know, I think it's interesting because social media, digital, is certainly one of the most visible parts of all campaigns, so everyone's always interested in it, and we all love these great memes and videos and things that get put out there. But I don't know if we all really understand what goes into that behind the scenes, so I think you really shed a lot of light there on those inner workings of how that all comes to be. So, I mean, I would love to monopolize 30 minutes of your time and just ask you questions, but we do have mics in the room here, so maybe I'll just monopolize a few minutes off the top and ask you a few questions, and then we can open it up for people here who have questions. So give some thought to what you want to ask Sarah. Get some fortitude, get some confidence so you can go up to the mic when you're ready to, when I point to the mics there. But first, maybe I'll ask you 2 or 3 questions off the top here, just to get it going. So, I mean, I think it's very clear to everyone here that you're extremely accomplished, you know, especially for your age. And I was just reading an article last week about John Fetterman's digital director, who was like 26-year-old woman. I'm wondering, do you think that, like, social media, there's something about social media and digital that lends itself to young people with talent being able to kind of rise quickly up the campaign ladder compared to other areas of the campaign team? And feel free to share from your own personal experiences with that as well.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's definitely true, only because we are part of the generation of folks who have just like lived and breathed on the internet since as long as we can remember, and especially Gen Z. I am not Gen Z, but I really appreciate the amount of time that they spend online. They even outrank me, and I consider myself like an internet gremlin. And so as a result, yeah, I think it's a great place for growth opportunity, especially if you can come at it with the perspective of really creative problem solving, right? Like what are the needs on a campaign and how do you solve them? So my first job in politics, I cold called my way onto the Hillary Clinton campaign. I basically found, I'm gonna put him on blast a little, sorry, Teddy Goff, who was the head of the chief digital and tech officer for the Hillary for America campaign, and he'd been one of the only people who'd been announced as being part of this. And I looked on Twitter and just searched his name and @Gmail, and I found that he had replied to someone like years earlier with his personal Gmail account on Twitter. He has since deleted it, hopefully. But I sent him an email and I said, hey, you don't know me. I work at Disney. I work in influencer marketing, and I think this is going to be a huge thing that you're going to want to get in front of in this campaign. Here are 5 things I think you're doing wrong, and one big idea: hire me to come fix it and to do this for you. And a month later, I was making my way to New York City to go work in Brooklyn headquarters for the Clinton campaign. So it's about finding the things that you do really well, and how do you insert yourself, and how do you really get up to that opportunity and then crush it. Of course, you have to crush it.
Yeah, obviously, digital stalking is the key to getting onto campaigns. That's really interesting, really interesting. And then obviously, from there you did crush it and rose up quite quickly. And I think that obviously, campaigns reward people who have that creativity and have that drive, very apparently. Come up with cool fly puns, it's a way to move up. So I think you probably touched on this a little bit in the presentation, but I mean, there's some politicians who are definitely naturals for this type of venue. AOC in the States, I think probably Jagmeet Singh in Canada, who just because of their persona, because of their age, they are natural on any platform. You put a camera in front of them, it's lights out, it's magic every time. I love Joe Biden, but he does not seem as the type of person who is necessarily hip with what the kids are doing these days. How do you take a politician like that and stay authentic to them and not try to force them to do something that is going to look weird? If you're working on a campaign for somebody who maybe isn't as natural in this sort of this space.
Yeah, what you have to do is highlight their strengths, right? And so, the fun thing about Joe Biden is he's a real off-the-cuff kind of guy. His best moments really come from the stuff that's not scripted, right? Especially when you put him in a situation where, people are asking him questions or he has, a really good one-liner. It's why right now, even in the White House, when, press will ask him something as he's leaving a room, he'll often turn around and give a quippy one-liner, and that's the thing that goes viral from the press conference. So having those moments where you can really elevate those, whether it's in the rope line for an event, which we had less of because we were campaigning during COVID, but towards the end of the campaign, really highlighting those moments, things like when he met a child at a rally who had a severe stutter like Joe Biden did when he was younger, right? And taking that moment and, clipping it, getting it out there in the right format and having that be how Joe Biden shows up on the internet. The other thing is not to your point, trying to force them into inauthentic moments. Part of the reason that we really loved doing these reels and very short, either slow motion moments or short form pieces were because we could easily prompt, at that time, Vice President Biden with the concept very quickly, get him to understand it, and just say, we'll show you it works, and it's the kind of thing where I can go and say, hey, can you go play with your dog for 10 minutes, and we'll film it, and that is natural, right? That's him in his element. Him putting on aviator sunglasses or him looking at the camera and just simply saying vote, right? Those are moments that we can turn into really good, dynamic social content without asking him to do too much and to do things that aren't natural to him.
All right, maybe I'll invite people to kind of make their way to the microphones while I ask you one or two more questions. So some ideas, and there's one mic over there, one mic over there. Last thing I'll ask you before we get to that, though, then, is just thinking about how digital interacts with the whole campaign. I think maybe 10 years ago, digital was just kind of some dude, you said, tweet out whatever we're doing today from the comms team, said, do this, and it's kind of a way. And now we're in this space where digital is driving content and driving messages. So from your experience, how did you find the digital team kind of integrating with the rest of the campaign, and what was kind of the relationship there?
Yeah, and I love my comm staffers. They're great, and they help me and help us not get sued. And so one thing I'll say is that as the years have gone by, digital is obviously getting more and more leadership opportunities, power, et cetera, funding, just because of how much we've been able to show return on investment, how much we've been able to show how audiences are shifting from broadcast to online. And so as a result, it hasn't been too hard to just, here you go, here are the metrics. But at the same time, it does take a mentality in your leadership of being open to that. One thing I really credit Jenna Malley-Dillon with is being chronically online, as us on the social and digital team were. And so as a result, she just got it. And she gave us the space to, and Rob Flaherty, our digital director, the space to kind of try new things. And I'm really grateful for that. And again, as time goes on, I think it'll just continue to get easier and easier for staffers, but definitely feel the slog of having to do that every 4 years.
Yeah. Let's take a question from the mic over there.
Well, hi there. So I actually have two questions. One's probably easier than the other. The first would be, you talked about handling sort of reactive sort of moments on the campaign, and one of them that I think really stood out to me was the sort of the really vitriolic sort of attacks that were coming from the right on social media. I think of the "Let's Go Brandon" sort of thing that sort of took place in 2021, and I'm just wondering if there was any sort of strategy or any sort of ideas that took place in order to counter that effectively, because we started to see later on, the Biden campaign starting to, take sort of lighthearted jabs at it, and eventually it turned into this whole dark Brandon thing, which has taken off on its own. The other question would be, what words do you have for campaign managers or managers of large campaigns, nationwide campaigns, that are risk averse, that aren't necessarily willing to try new social media networks or new channels because they feel like they can't control the narrative, or they feel like it puts them in too prone of a position to defend afterward?
Yeah, so interesting, because I think they're somewhat related, your two questions. The first is that, yes, I said it during my presentation, but again, our goal was never to be mean-spirited. That was not the approach our candidate wanted to take, because that's not who our candidate wanted to be as president of the United States. Difficult position to be in when you're getting hurled insults on the internet constantly, but what we had to do was just focus on the positive, focus on our work, focus on the good aspects that of policy that we were giving out, and then do as much as we can to make sure that we were boosting those into the right ecosystems. They have gotten a little bit more quippy now that they're in the White House, which good for them. But it also becomes a moment where you have to find those opportunities to just fight back a little bit, right? It's like the fly swatter. It's the their team is doing this really great thing right now where the Republican Party is talking about these PPP loans that people got during the pandemic, and saying that people should have to repay them, but then also highlighting the fact that Republican members of Congress had these massive loans as well that they are trying to make sure that they don't have to pay back, and the hypocritical nature of that. And so it's about doing it in a way, again, that's not mean-spirited, that's factual, that you can hang on to that and it's not gonna come back to bite you. Because the other thing is you don't wanna give fodder to more trolls. And then on that side, to your second question about how do you basically talk to campaign leadership, you can basically show them, at least on the progressive side, how much the conservatives in the US, at least for us, they're beating us on a lot of platforms. And if we aren't there, if we don't show up, then we're already conceding. And so for us, it's important to make sure that we're everywhere, to make sure that we are, that we're talking to our leadership about this, and to give them realistic expectations for what the content can be, and the resources that are necessary to do it. Because it's easy to say, we have this pipe dream to do this, right? But, and then they'll say, well, what's going to be the return on that investment? How many voters are you going to get, right? It's either votes or money, right? And so how are you building that audience? And you have to come to them with a really good plan, but then also at the same time show them, hey, this is our plan, this is how we want to go about it, but then we have to do it because we're getting crushed potentially by the other side if we don't.
Yeah, next question over there.
Yeah, it's sort of a follow-up to his question. We worked on the Obama campaign, and the first sign we saw was, don't talk to the media, no pictures, and we're looking at one another, because that's what we're all about. We're all about getting your message out to the media and figuring out how to do it. And no pictures. Anyway, I broke the rules, and I took some pictures because it's almost like you couldn't believe some of the things that were, but I didn't post. So my question to you is, I waited to post until it was after the inauguration and all of that, because we kept our mouths shut for months. We didn't say anything to anybody about what we were doing because we were totally respectful of the process. Now we know that it's a shorter period of time. In between the time that you take the picture, and I'm all for the dog pictures, by the way, and I always recommend that to politicians. What are the stops along the way in the process before you take the picture or the video and you post? Because it got shorter and shorter along the way. What's your formula?
Yeah, and if I think I'm understanding your question correctly, it's about how do you essentially maintain and operate systems to make sure you're getting rapid response out quickly?
Get permission. Get permission.
Yeah.
Because I'm agreeing with you, there are some politicians, it's not even the politicians, usually it's a staffer that sort of, they don't want the pictures.
Yeah.
Or let's say if you, like with ministers, especially here, they do a lot of events on a Saturday. And so sometimes they don't even have a staffer with them. It's not like a big campaign for Biden. I'm talking about, they're going to church basements, they're going to all kinds of events. But if nobody is there to take the picture, the politician has to sort of pass their own phone to somebody else. And I've got them to do it, by the way, so that they get those great moments. But my point is, how many agreements do you have to have before you get your post out, your social media out?
Yeah. So we set up a couple of different systems. There's a system for essentially gathering user-generated content, UGC. I'm sorry if I used acronyms during my presentation. In which, to your point, if it's not campaign staff gathering photos, videos, et cetera, a system for making sure that you're trying to see that, whether that's searching for your candidate or principal's name on different social media platforms using SEO, or finding that content that you might want to repost, and then working to DM those folks to essentially gather the ability to utilize it. But then internally, when it comes to rapid response, we also had to set up our own approval chains to make sure that we were operating in a way that we can move quickly. So I think we have something like 5 approvers, and almost their entire job is just to approve content for social, like a legal person, a research comms, policy, and I'm missing the last one, but I'll think about it. And we would send them content, whether it was super rapid response in chat rooms on Slack or other messaging systems, or we had twice a day sort of documents that we would send with all the content that we would want to put out for the next day or in the next couple of hours. And so that would give us the ability to turn things around really quickly, to think about the news of the day, but it included a lot of setup, a lot of test and learn and optimization of that process to make sure that when, at the end of the campaign, when things are most critical, that we had a smooth system for operating. And so it really takes a lot of that work at the front end to make sure that in the end, you're able to operate at the highest caliber when it matters most.
I'm not positive your opponent had quite the rigorous approval process for his Twitter feed, at least, at the end of the day. We got some people at the other mic here. Let's give that mic a chance to ask some questions.
Hi, thank you very much for your time and for the information you shared. I have a question that I think preempts a little bit of what Laura just asked about, like the process. Ottawa can be a bit of a policy-focused town. I'm sure Washington's much the same. If you have a candidate or if you have a group that you're working with that really wants to focus on policy, and I'm talking like evidence, the long issue paper, that kind of thing, how do you convince them, or what message would you give them to say it's important to shorten it, it's important to get it to something that's really digestible?
I mean, the metrics are there, right? That like you have to have a hook in the first 3 seconds of content to make sure that people don't scroll away. There's so much content on the internet, and like so little available real estate in a person's brain, and so you really have to make it digestible in order to have them understand and retain and figure out like why it matters to them. And so we did this in a couple ways on this campaign. I had to cut the slide for content for time, but it included things like fact sheets, like dynamic social posts that really just evidence-based, to your point blank, our position versus our opponent's position on these matters that make sense, whether it was healthcare, the economy, et cetera, so that if they were going to retain a few pieces of information, it was at least the most key information, and then they were able to potentially share that across platforms, right? Or doing things like on YouTube, dynamic explainer videos, that are like whiteboard sessions, right? That really give you the opportunity to learn, but in a digestible manner, like 2 minutes, 30 seconds at the most. Because if not, you're expecting a ton from people, knowing that they have busy lives, and they might be more likely to want to care about dog videos or videos of their kids versus a video on heavy-duty policy.
Let's actually maybe I'll ask you something there on I think we're all kind of the view that the internet soundbite gets smaller and smaller as time goes by. It's actually interesting though, like the opposition leader in Canada right now is kind of made a thing about putting out these longer videos, 4-minute videos, 5-minute videos, where he kind of explains issues in a lot more detail. And I mean, I don't agree with this guy on anything, but you listen to his videos, and by the end, you're kind of almost agreeing with him on things that are, when you think about it, maybe not where you want it to be in your own headspace. So, like, is there a place for, you think, longer, more engaged content, or is that just something that there just isn't an appetite for online?
YouTube. And I'm really not biased when I say this, but YouTube is the place for that content, right? YouTube is a place where like people go to see videos specifically and that sort of content. And so it's a place where I really recommend people, if they do want to do some more of that long form content, to do so. But all platforms are a little bit different. You have to really, if you can and you have the resources to, narrow down the focus using best practices for each on each platform. And then additionally understand how each platform is potentially set up for more than one piece of dynamic content. So whereas like TikTok is really oriented towards short form, really scrollable video, you have the opportunity on YouTube to both do that in the form of shorts, but then also do long form explainers in the form of video on your channels. And so, yeah, it's a great space to be, and I'm glad that we have all of these dynamic platforms that you can really build bespoke content on.
All right, Professor Armstrong, give us a question.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for being here. I also have 2 questions for you. The first is a little bit ridiculous, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So when you say 9 by 16, do you mean like this or like this?
It is vertical content, so this.
Vertical?
Yes.
Okay. I had that totally wrong, so I appreciate your clarifying that. And the second question is, we all are sort of aware of what's happening with Twitter right now. The audience is fracturing. I quit last week. And folks are starting to move into different spaces and are experimenting with different platforms. From the perspective of somebody who's responsible for a digital team, is there kind of a minimum user base? Like, how do you decide which new or emerging platforms are worth your time and attention?
It's a great question. I'll caveat with the fact that I am not currently running any social teams, and I feel for people who are at the moment with just like so much uncertainty on some of those platforms. But at the same time, minimum usable user base, I think, is like not the right thing to think of, because if there's a community anywhere, you should be talking to them. And so it's the reason why, if there are people on platforms that you're not utilizing right now, think about a content strategy, test, learn, and go for it. But at the same time, understand your resources and potentially where some more of these like stable legacy platforms are to really hone in on.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question here.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. This is amazing. I loved everything that you showed. It's great. I think that there are a variety of things that are different between Canada and the US, and the most pronounced is money. So if you were to take that and scale it to a $30 million entire campaign, what would you prioritize in terms of who you would staff and the types of platforms that you would use and all of that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think the first thing that I would do is do a little digging on audience, right? On the topic of prioritization, right? If you really have to prioritize, where is the best bang for your buck? For me, my brain goes without thinking, just based on like my experience as a social strategist right now, 9x16. Alex said I was going to say it a lot, but it's true. I think like 9x16 is one of those formats. Again, it's like setting trends, whether it's on TikTok or Shorts or Reels, wherever you're getting it, but also like it's just how people naturally use their phone. You're not using your phone like this unless you have like an LG Dare or whatever it was, right? But you're using it like this, and so people this is the way that they consume content. And so I think it's interesting, and also the ability to have a strategist that just lives in that format also means that you can do more work cross-platform, because whereas like Facebook is prioritizing long-form content right now, or Twitter is prioritizing copy-only content right now, 9x16 you can do on TikTok, Facebook stories, Instagram stories, YouTube shorts. It's more of a space where you can work across the board. And so I would, in my professional opinion, think about that.
Excellent. Well, I think that's it. So thank you very much for sharing your experience, your wisdom with us. I think I'll turn it over to Jen Robson here for a few closing words.
I have the unpleasant task of saying goodnight to you now. Thank you again so much, Sarah, for everything that you shared with us tonight. Thank you as well to Alex Patterson, to YouTube Canada. Thanks, Dan Arnold, for being such a terrific moderator this evening. Thank you, everyone who was here tonight and online. Thanks as well to the venue staff here. Have a terrific night, and we hope to see you at our next public event. Thanks.